Our son says this house is his. He threw me out.
Pick up your bag. We're going inside.
You can't stop me.
Watch me.
I pulled into my driveway on a bitter November afternoon and immediately knew something was wrong. My wife, Sandra, was standing outside the gate with one canvas bag beside her. The wind was cutting through her thin coat, and her hands were trembling. She was not crying. That somehow made the sight even more painful. Sandra had always been the calm one in our marriage, the woman who could face a crisis, steady everyone around her, and still remember to put coffee on the table. Yet now she stood outside the home we had built together, as if she were a stranger waiting for permission to enter. I stopped the truck and walked toward her. "Sandra, what happened?" She looked at the house before looking at me. Then she said the words that changed everything. "Our son says the house belongs to him now. He told me you transferred it to him. He said, I had to leave before you came home." For a moment, I could hear nothing except the wind scraping dead leaves across the pavement. Our son had lied to his own mother. He had used her trust in me to convince her that I had secretly given away our home. Worse, he had ordered her out with only one bag, knowing she would never create a scene or embarrass him in front of the neighbors. I did not shout. I did not pound on the gate. I simply picked up Sandra's bag and took her hand. "You are not leaving your home," I told her. "Not today. Not ever, because he says so." We walked inside together. Our son was waiting in the foyer. He did not look shocked to see me, but he did look annoyed that Sandra was beside me. His confidence came from years of being rescued. Whenever a business idea failed, we helped. When he could not pay his rent, we opened our door. When debts appeared, we quietly covered them. We had mistaken repeated rescue for love, and he had mistaken our kindness for weakness. He folded his arms and said, "Dad, we need to talk about the property." I set Sandra's bag down. "No," I replied. "You need to explain why your mother was standing outside in the cold." He tried to sound reasonable. He claimed there had been a misunderstanding. According to him, I had talked for years about leaving him the house. He said he was only taking control early so he could protect the property and make better financial decisions. Then he insisted Sandra was being dramatic, even though she had been the one quietly accepting his cruelty. Sandra finally spoke. "You told me your father had already signed everything." He avoided her eyes. That was when I understood that this was not an impulsive argument. He had planned it. For weeks he had asked Sandra strange questions, whether her name appeared on the title, where we kept important papers, and whether we had ever discussed the property with a lawyer. Sandra had refused to answer because she believed those matters belonged between husband and wife, so he created a lie. He told her that I had transferred the house to him and was finishing the remaining paperwork elsewhere. He knew she trusted me completely. He turned that trust into a weapon. I asked him one simple question. "Show me the document that says this house belongs to you." He hesitated, then produced a folder. Inside were copies of property records, letters, and a draft agreement. The papers looked official from a distance, but they proved nothing. Some pages were incomplete. Others carried language that no legitimate transfer would use. My signature appeared on one form, but it was not my signature. He had built his confidence on paperwork. He hoped nobody would examine closely. I took out my phone and called our attorney. Our son laughed when he heard whom I was calling. He said a lawyer could not change what had already been done. He still believed he had won, but he did not know the most important detail. The house had never been available for him to take. Years earlier, Sandra and I had protected it through proper estate planning. No transfer could occur without verified authorization, and no promise made at a family dinner could replace a legal deed. My attorney listened while I explained what had happened. Then she confirmed what I already knew. Sandra and I still controlled the property. Our son had no ownership rights. Any document carrying a false signature would create a much bigger problem for him than for us. His expression changed. I asked the attorney to review everything immediately, freeze any attempted transaction connected to the house, and remove our son from every position of trust we had ever given him. He had access to certain family accounts for emergencies. That access was revoked. He had been named in our estate plan. That plan would be revised. He had been allowed to live in our home because he was family. That permission was ending. For the first time that afternoon, he looked afraid. "You would really do this to your own son?" he asked. I stared at him. "You put your mother outside in freezing weather and told her she no longer had a home. Do not ask me what I would do to my son. Ask yourself what you already did to your mother." His anger returned. He accused us of controlling him with money. He complained that we had promised the house would eventually be his, so taking it now should not matter. He spoke as though an inheritance were a debt parents owed their children. He never once asked whether Sandra was cold. He never apologized for frightening her. He cared only about losing the property. That told me everything. The house was not merely an asset. Sandra and I had spent decades turning it into a home. We had painted rooms after work, repaired pipes on weekends, planted trees in the yard, and saved for every improvement. Sandra's garden stood behind the house. She knew when every flower would bloom and which birds returned each spring. Our son saw a price. Sandra saw a life, and he had tried to remove her from it. When the attorney examined the documents, the truth became clearer. Our son had been preparing to use the property to solve his own financial problems. He had debts he had hidden from us, and he believed control of the house would give him the security he needed for another deal. Instead of asking for help, he decided that the future inheritance in his imagination already belonged to him. The draft papers and false statements were stopped before he could complete the scheme. The house remained ours. The locks were changed, not to keep Sandra out, but to make certain nobody could ever do that to her again. Our son was told to collect his belongings and leave. His reaction was immediate. He moved from arrogance to outrage, then from outrage to pleading. He said he had nowhere to go. He reminded us that we were his parents. He promised to correct everything if we gave him another chance. Sandra listened with tears in her eyes. I knew how deeply she loved him. I also knew that love was the reason she might forgive too quickly. So I said what neither of us had wanted to admit for years. We have given you chances. What we never gave you were consequences. He left that evening. The silence after the door closed felt heavier than the argument. Sandra sat at the kitchen table, holding a warm cup between both hands. She asked whether we had failed as parents. It was the question every loving parent asks when a child grows into someone they no longer recognize. I told her the truth. We had made mistakes. We had protected him from discomfort so often that he never learned responsibility. We had paid bills he should have paid and solved problems he should have faced. But our generosity did not force him to lie. Our patience did not force him to humiliate his mother. Those choices belonged to him. Sandra looked toward the hallway where our family photographs hung. He was such a gentle little boy, she whispered. That boy is still part of him, I said, but we cannot keep rewarding the man he has chosen to become. The next morning, we met with our attorney. We updated our estate plan so our son could never assume control of the home or pressure Sandra again. Any future support would be carefully structured. If there were grandchildren to protect, help would go directly toward their education and well-being, not through someone who treated family property like a personal bank account. We also documented everything that had happened. The false papers, the messages, and the attempted intimidation were preserved. We did not do this for revenge. We did it because forgiveness without protection is simply an invitation for the same harm to return. Our son called repeatedly during the following weeks. At first, his messages were angry. He blamed Sandra for telling me. He blamed me for overreacting. He blamed the lawyer for turning a family disagreement into a legal matter. He blamed everyone except himself. Then his tone changed. He said he was sorry. But his first apologies focused on what he had lost: his place in the house, his access to money, and his expected inheritance. He still did not understand that the greatest damage could not be measured in dollars. He had made his mother feel disposable inside the home she had built. Sandra refused to speak with him until he could acknowledge that truth. Months passed. Without us rescuing him, our son finally had to face his debts and his decisions. He moved into a small apartment and took steady work instead of chasing another risky plan. For the first time in years, he had to live within his means. It was not the life he believed he deserved, but it was an honest life. One afternoon, he came to the house and waited outside the same gate where Sandra had once stood with her bag. He did not enter without permission. That detail mattered. When Sandra and I walked out, he looked exhausted. There was no folder under his arm and no speech prepared. He looked at his mother and said, "I lied because I wanted the house. I knew you would believe Dad had made the decision, and I used that against you. I made you feel homeless. I am sorry." For the first time, his apology was about what he had done rather than what he had lost. Sandra cried. She hugged him, but she did not hand him a key. That was the beginning of accountability, not the end of it. We did not immediately restore him to our will. We did not return his access to our accounts. Trust is not repaired by one emotional conversation. It is rebuilt through consistent actions, honesty, and time. He began visiting us without asking for money. He helped Sandra in the garden. He paid down his debts little by little. Some days were hopeful, other days were difficult. Healing did not move in a straight line. Still, our home slowly felt peaceful again. The following spring, Sandra planted flowers beside the gate. I watched her kneel in the soil, pressing each plant carefully into place. That gate no longer represented the moment she had been rejected. It became a reminder that she had returned to the life nobody had the right to take from her. What happened taught me a lesson I wish I had understood years earlier. Parents sometimes believe love means making every road easy for their children. But when help has no boundaries, it can feed entitlement instead of gratitude. A child who is never allowed to face consequences may eventually believe that everything his parents own is already his. Our son nearly destroyed his family because he valued a house more than the people who made it a home. He thought ownership came from expectation. He learned that it comes from sacrifice, responsibility, and respect. And I learned something too. Remaining calm does not mean remaining weak. I did not need to shout at the gate. I did not need to threaten him in the foyer. I needed to stand beside my wife, uncover the truth, and draw a line that should have been drawn long before. That afternoon, when I found Sandra outside with one bag, our son believed he had taken control of our future. In reality, he had revealed exactly why he was not ready to inherit it. The house remained ours. The family survived, though it changed. And the woman who had been ordered away walked back through her own front door, with her head held high. Because a home is not claimed by the loudest voice in the room. It belongs to the people who built it with love, and who are brave enough to protect that love when betrayal comes from inside the family.